Hello everyone, welcome, and thanks for checking out my first video on my new YouTube channel. Before I get started, I would just like to give a shout out to some of those content creators that have inspired me to begin making videos for the gaming community. James, Cinemassacre and crew, love your stuff. Keep up the great work. I follow and subscribe, love it, and just keep them coming. Metal Jesus Rocks and crew, thank you for sharing all of your knowledge, information, experience, and adventures in gaming with us through your walk. Pro Jared, gaming historian, RGT85, beat 'em ups. There's probably several others in there, but it would take a long time for me to mention all of you. So for all of you game content creators out there that are on YouTube, thank you for the inspiration, and I just hope to be a positive contributor to this great community. Okay, here goes. Hopefully this will be short and sweet and will save at least one of you some headaches. Recently, I was perusing around my local retro game store and I came across this beautiful, near mint condition, PAL version Super Nintendo Entertainment System. So I picked it up. Now, as most of us do when we buy a new console, we take it home and we want to try it out. Well, there were a couple of challenges, as to be expected. We're talking about a 90s game console built for the PAL standard. So there's two things that we have to consider here. The 50 Hz, 60 Hz signal difference between PAL and NTSC respectively, but also the power requirement difference. Well, here's how I solved that problem and got this PAL version Super Nintendo to work beautifully on my US rig.
The logical first cable choice is the multi-out composite cable that came with my original Super Nintendo. The port was the same on both consoles and the cable fit, however, it didn't work. So I thought, okay, how about the RF adapter that came with the console? Perhaps that will work. Unfortunately, that didn't work either. Okay, no problem. I'll just use the RF switch that came with my North American Super Nintendo. That will fit my TVs, and perhaps that will solve the issue. Nope, it didn't. Take a quick look at the size difference of the two RF connectors.
So, even after trying those multiple video options on multiple TVs throughout my house, it still wasn't working. At this point, I started thinking, have I bought a lemon? Oh, wait a second. I have one more option I can try. The OSSC. The OSSC uses a SCART cable. SCART was a European standard, right? American TVs didn't have SCART ports, but European TVs did. Well, the SCART cable's gotta work, right?
I hooked the PAL SNES up to my OSSC using the SCART cable, and while the OSSC detected a signal and appeared to be syncing correctly, I still wasn't getting any picture or sound on my TV.
So it was at this point that I decided to take my concern to the internet. Maybe there was something I was missing. Turns out there was. So I did a search, PAL SNES on US TV. Didn't really give me a whole lot. There were a couple of videos on NTSC versus PAL, so you could see like what it looked like on the display, what those differences were. And then there was actually somebody on the other side of the pond that had created a video like this one. Well, how do I get an American SNES to work on my PAL TV? So the coin had been flipped. But that didn't really have an answer for me either. So YouTube wasn't the place to find the answer. I searched around Reddit a little bit, and then I put a couple of feelers out to my Facebook groups. Turns out what the issue was the power brick.
The power supply that came with the PAL SNES was a 9-volt, 1300 milliamp brick. It looks a little different than the Nintendo power bricks for North American consoles, primarily because the main bit sits in the middle of two cords, one that goes to the console and plugs into the back, and the other that plugs into an electrical outlet. Now, Because this is built for European electrical standards, it won't fit into any US or North American electrical outlets without some sort of adapter piece. When I purchased the console, it also came with a multi-standard voltage adapter. So I grabbed the plug end that would fit the US power standard, fit it to the converter, and then plugged in the SNES power brick into that. The result was a bulky, ugly, unbalanced monstrosity of a power adapter assembly that was too heavy to stay plugged into any outlet. Next, I searched around my house and tried about a dozen different AC adapters that were close to what the console had needed, and not one would fit the PAL SNES.
Now, after a couple hours of posting my problem into some of those Facebook groups, I got a variety of replies suggesting a couple of different types of power bricks. For example, Gen 1 Sega Genesis brick, linear power supply that might work. Tried it, plug wouldn't fit. And then another user recommended a switching power supply.
So, after a little hunting around, here's what I ended up with. An Insignia multi-voltage AC adapter from Best Buy that could switch between different voltages and included 7 different tips that could fit most devices with a round pin power connector. It was $19.99 USD plus tax.
It really was that simple. Most modern displays nowadays can take a PAL or an NTSC signal. These TVs are smart enough to be able to convert that to fit your display.
So now, my PAL version Super Nintendo was up and running with the new AC adapter and connected to my TV via SCART cable through the OSSC. And with the right settings, it looked glorious. The console set that I bought came with 3 game cartridges. It only made sense to start with the PAL pack-in, Super Mario All-Stars plus Super Mario World cartridge. It's a classic. How can you go wrong? Everything looked and sounded great. The colors were bright and vibrant, popping off the screen. The pixels were sharp and clean in all their high-resolution glory. I mean, take a look. I didn't really notice any difference in the gameplay, and I'll have to compare them side by side, but the only thing that appears to be slightly different is the tone and tint of the colors. The next game I tried was Mortal Kombat 2, Midway's famed franchise that practically defined the fighting games of the 90s. Now, I spent hundreds of hours playing this game on my American Super Nintendo. Again, the colors looked vibrant and popped off the screen, but perhaps may have been a little brighter than what I was used to, and they appeared to feel slightly warmer in color tone than the US version of the game. This could also be the OSSC at work. The third cartridge that came with the system was Starwing, or, as it's known in the US, Star Fox. I was really interested to see this one in action, because Star Fox was the first game released for Super Nintendo that featured the Super FX chip. The most notable differences between the NTSC and PAL versions was the title of the game, and on the control select screen, it featured an image of the SNES PAL controller with colored buttons, a neat attention to detail. Everything else played just like the US version. The controls were fast and responsive, the game looked and sounded great, and the colors popped off the screen like they did on the last 2 games I tested. Only this time, the color tone appeared to feel a bit cooler than the American version. But again, this could be the OSSC doing what it does best, and bringing forward the amazing quality of all the great SNES games that we grew up playing.
So there you have it. All it takes is a $20 Insignia multi-voltage AC adapter with the right plug to get your PAL version Super Nintendo working on your US system. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope that I at least saved somebody some problems moving forward with your PAL Super Nintendo. Thanks a lot.